I'm Yvonne from Growing Old Disgracefully.
I'm Marie from Midlife Dramas in Pyjamas. You can find us both on Facebook.
And now we've come together to bring you inspirational stories from midlife and beyond in our podcast,
Hear Me Roar!
Oh, here we are again.
Yes, here we are.
And today we're going to be talking to Eilidh Whiteford, who's former MP. And what about you? What have you been up to?
Well, over on my Facebook page, I've been coming out in solidarity with a female poet this week.
Oh, wow.
Donna Ashworth, who was absolutely slated in the Times. Now, bear in mind, she's had several number one bestsellers in the Times, and this columnist completely ripped her and other similar poets apart, saying that, you know, that they were like getting in the way of highbrow poets and what have you, and it's just absolutely appalling.
So did you just go, saddle my high horse, Marjorie?
I did. I said, get my soapbox, bring it hither. So I climbed onto my soapbox and supported her and said it was outrageous, and everybody piled on and agreed it was outrageous because nobody should be attacking anybody in any newspaper or anywhere else for that matter.
No. And people who write poetry are generally doing it from a very good place.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're the nicest people in the world.
Yes, well, this lady's a lovely, lovely lady. But yeah, it's just outrageous to attack people.
Inexplicable.
And unnecessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, today we're speaking to another lovely lady, Whiteford. Now, Eilidh was born in 1969 and she grew up on the Banffshire coast. Banffshire's in the northeast of Scotland. After studying literature at Glasgow University, Eilidh went off to Canada for her postgrad studies, and then she came back to Scotland where she began a career in the voluntary sector. So from 2010 to 2017, she says, turning over the bit of paper, she served in the House of Commons as MP for Banff and Buchan. And I do like a bit of Banff and Buchan.
I've heard you do, darling, yes.
During that time, she was the SNP spokesperson for work and pensions and for agriculture and fisheries.
Get that out.
Yeah. Ran out of breath there. Eilidh lives in Cruden Bay and she lives with her husband, son and a grumpy cat. And she now works for the strategic advisory firm True North. So today's episode is Living Life Upside Down, and Eilidh has truly inspired both of us, and you will find out in a moment exactly why. Hi Eilidh, lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you ladies as well.
Thank you. You're a former MP who, in your own words, has lived life upside down. You've become a mum at 50 for the first time, but we're going to get to that. But before we do, we wanted to ask you what you're doing now in your post-MP career.
Well, I'm now working in public affairs. I'm working for a small, fairly new consultancy called True North, and we offer strategic advice, mostly to businesses, quite a lot in the energy and financial services sectors.
So does that touch on the political side? Do you get to draw from your experience there?
I'm very much tapping into my political experience, yeah. But also using a lot of communication skills that I've built up over the years. So it's good fun. I'm working with a great bunch of people. I really enjoy what I'm doing.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so in your early career, you started off at Glasgow University where you graduated with first-class honours in English and Scottish literature. And then you ended up in Canada for your postgrad studies. How did that come about?
Well, when I was coming towards the end of my first degree, one of my professors and I were just discussing if I was going to do anything further. And he suggested, it was him who planted the seeds really. He said, have you thought about going somewhere else and going overseas and just getting the benefit of that international experience? And then he had somebody in mind for me to study with, a wonderful academic who's no longer with us called Catherine Kerrigan. And she was based at Guelph in Canada. So she was over in Scotland for a conference. So I met her, we had a bit of a discussion. And one thing led to another. And about a year later, I ended up in Toronto Airport and, you know, did a master's degree at Guelph in Canada, where they've got this amazing library that has some of the best resources anywhere in North America for Scottish culture, for Scottish history and literature, because they were bequeathed them. Obviously, it's a part of Canada that has a lot of connections to Scotland just because of the history. Lots of Scots kind of have ended up in that area over the decades. So as far as being an international student goes, it was a lot easier than some, but it was a hugely beneficial experience. I really loved my time in Canada.
And no language barrier either, so that must have helped.
Well, it depends where you are. There was a lot of French spoken in Canada as well, of course, and my French was always rubbish. You'd probably remember, Yvonne, what it was like at school. I wasn't very good at French. But fortunately, you don't need it to get by. You can still get by in English.
So after you'd finished your studies, did you come straight back to Scotland? Or did
I came back to
there?
Scotland and I did a doctorate. I finished my doctorate in, I think, 1998 back in Glasgow. And then I worked in academia for a while as well. I did quite a lot around adult and continuing education. But I think by that point, I kind of realised that it wasn't really what I wanted to do. I wanted to do other things, and I was quite involved in other things. I was quite active politically and whatnot. So I spent the next few years working in the voluntary sector, very much doing the kind of public affairs things that I'm doing now, actually, not so categorically different, but obviously I was doing it more in-house rather than kind of agency work in that way.
And what made you take the leap into actually becoming an MP?
Well, I went to an event, a political event. It was a dinner, it was a celebration event. And I got talking to some people there really very late in the evening after quite a lot of wine had been drunk. And somebody in quite a teasing way said, "Oh, Eilidh would be a good candidate." And I didn't say no quickly enough. I didn't say, "No, absolutely never." And consequently, next Monday morning, I had an email in my inbox when I opened up my work email, and this was the forms to fill out to go for candidate vetting, and the rest really just followed from there.
Did you have any second thoughts though? Because that's quite a big step to go from what you were doing.
But I was at a stage in my life where I was kind of looking for what's the next step going to be, and I don't know. It was a big thought, because also there's no guarantee that you're going to, first of all, get selected as a candidate, and secondly, get elected. I mean, there's just no guarantees at all. It's a very, very insecure and quite whimsical kind of lifestyle in politics. You just never really know. There's definitely no job security, but there's also no, things can turn very quickly. So it can be quite difficult to plan ahead, and you just never know. In a process like that, some of the local members might prefer someone else. Like I say, it's very whimsical, and so I kind of entered into the process thinking, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained, and got selected. There was supposed to be, everybody thought there was going to be an election in 2007. It was the election that never was. It was the one that all the, I believe all the advertising hoardings had been bought and paid for and everything. And then Gordon Brown bottled it, and that election just didn't happen. And then everyone had to hang about for 2.5 years. So I'd been through this really rapid process of selection, a very accelerated few months. And then all of a sudden you're kind of in limbo for the next 2.5 years.
Wow.
But you went on and you did it.
Yes.
For a good few years.
Yeah, I was in the House of Commons for 7 years, yeah.
Well, that's a fairly long time in any job as well these days, isn't it? Yeah. So when you ended your career as an MP, what did you feel that you'd achieved? And it sounds a little bit rude, doesn't it? Like, oh, I don't mean that. But you must have walked away thinking to yourself, I did this, I did this, I did this.
Yeah.
And I'm so
I mean,
proud.
I think politics generally, if you're an opposition MP of any party, really, you can sometimes feel like you're a bit of an extra in a pantomime. You know, you've just got this sort of walk-on part, but you know, it can be quite frustrating sometimes, because even if you're winning the argument, you may not be winning the vote just because of the way the party system works. So I think what you achieve in politics, I mean, for me, I managed to get a private member's bill through the House of Commons, and I was the only opposition MP of any party in the 2015-17 Parliament who managed to do that.
Wow.
So I was very proud of being able to get that actually onto the statute book. I think the other things are, you do a lot of things that are not so public, where people come to you with problems that they have that they've found really intractable or can't solve. And, you know, you do manage to help a lot of people on an individual basis. But in terms of changing policy, if you're on the opposition side, you don't have a lot of opportunity to really do that. So, you know, you take the small wins, you take the wins on what you've been able to do, and things that you've been able to raise, things you've been able to highlight, but you're also very aware of what you can't do as well.
So after a wonderful career in politics, you became a mum at 50, which in your words was living life upside down. Can you tell us about that? What did you mean by that?
Well, I think you know, I always imagined that I would have a family and I might do politics later in life. I certainly didn't think that I would do politics first and then have a family afterwards. Life doesn't always work out the way you want it to, or the way you imagine it's going to. I just feel very, very lucky that I do have a wee boy, and he's great fun. He's hard work. He's great fun.
They're all hard work.
And that doesn't change the older they get. Sometimes they become harder work.
Mine are in their 20s, and
mine too.
I'm still helping them. In fact, I did an open university course when I was in my 40s, and I remember sitting there with my dad going, I bet you never thought you'd be helping me with my maths homework at 42 or whatever it was.
So,
thanks for that.
Got that to look forward to.
I do think, though, I've never heard a parent yet who doesn't say they're constantly exhausted and constantly working really hard at it. So, you know, I kind of think it's a great equaliser in lots of ways.
So thinking along those lines, if you were 50, where were you, or were you anywhere in the menopause journey at this point?
Well, I was I think looking back, I didn't really think about it like this at the time, but looking back, I was probably quite well into perimenopause. I think it kind of creeps up on folk. You don't realise that that's what's causing symptoms, but I think in retrospect, it absolutely, definitely was. And obviously, you know, I've gone through menopause since then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been interesting. To be honest, when it was at its worst, when I was, you know, struggling most with symptoms, I was still feeding the wee one. And, you know, they're contraindicated. You can't really take anything for the menopause. You can't do HRT while you're still breastfeeding. So I just kind of had to get on with it, really.
What sorts of symptoms were you suffering?
Hot flushes.
Right.
It's like my temperature would go from normal to just volcanic in a few seconds. And that all settled down. It just kind of disappeared as quickly as it came, to be honest.
Did the pregnancy hormones help with that?
I don't know. I mean, I think pregnancy definitely reset my hormones a bit and probably offset some of those symptoms while I was pregnant. And certainly some of the perimenopausal stuff just didn't really bother me again. But then the hot flushes, which I hadn't been getting before I was pregnant, they caught up on me.
Yeah.
But they've kind of settled down a wee bit.
I think there'll be a lot of awe felt by some of our listeners, realising that you coped with the menopause, which can be exhausting, and a newborn, which can be extremely exhausting, all at the same time.
Yeah, Yeah, it's funny because I think as I get older, I've got more stamina. I think I definitely don't need quite as much sleep as I used to need, and I think I don't feel, I don't feel any more or less knackered at the end of the day than I used to. I think I was probably also quite lucky with some of the menopausal stuff too. That, I know a lot of women have a really, really rough time and have a lot of kind of hormonal swings and things. And I think I got off relatively lightly compared to some women. I think it's different for, people are different.
Yeah.
It is different. I mean,
Different
there's like
experiences.
about 40,000 symptoms. Well, you know how many symptoms there are, Marie.
Well,
There are, and not
Yeah.
everybody gets all of them,
no. At one point, I read there were 34. Now I've since read there were like 50. But
I don't know. It seems to change every time I
it
read
seems
it.
to change, but
I think-
thankfully, you don't tend to get all of them.
No.
You just get a few of them.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it was
I
never
think I'm a bit
taught.
stoic as well. I think I'm just a bit kind of,
Yeah.
just get on with it if I can.
It was never taught in school. And
No.
I think it is being taught a bit more now. It is being taught a bit more now. Sorry, put my teeth back in.
Please do. Don't want them dropping out down your dress.
Like when we were all at school, it was never talked about at all, even by your mum.
No, that's true. That's very true.
Yeah. I mean, my mum discussed periods with me by just throwing a packet of pads into the bottom of my wardrobe and saying, "Here you go, you'll need these someday." That was my
And that
entire
was it.
birds and bees talk with my mum.
Hmm.
But yeah, nobody discussed menopause at all. And all I knew was that you got hot flushes. That was it.
Yes, that does seem to be the main symptom that people talk about and refer to, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's one of the more
I
annoying
think that's
ones.
true. And I think, okay, if you were a kid in school learning about this, you'd probably forget it and think, nah, that's not for another 30 years or whatever.
Yeah.
But it might help you know what's going on with your mother.
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
It might be good education for why your mum's going a bit crazy.
Why does she keep running out into the snow naked?
Yeah, exactly. Why doesn't she need any? Why is this house freezing now?
Why was she calm 2 minutes ago and now she's absolutely raging?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how did you find being an older mother, especially like when you had to go to, because I had my first at 33 and my second at 36. And when I went to maternity appointments, I was surrounded by really young mothers and I felt quite sort of, old and out of place. How did you deal with that? Were you aware of it? Did you
the
feel
first
anything?
antenatal class I went to, I walked into the room and I saw a woman who looked about my age sitting in the seat. So I thought, I'll go and sit beside her and, I'll just make small talk or whatever. It turned out she was there with her daughter. I mean, there is an age gap, but it's also, I think there are a lot more older mums now. And,
No,
I'm still probably the oldest mum in the playground, but I'm not the oldest parent, I don't think. I think there are dads that are older, and I think there are, there's quite a lot of mums in their 40s now, really.
Oh, yeah.
And that doesn't
definitely.
feel like such a big age gap. And, it keeps me young.
What about, did you get called a geriatric mother? Because I
think that's the
a horrible
term. I mean, I think that is the term. And you just, what's wrong with that? No, I mean, it's I've been called worse. I think maybe, having been in politics, you just develop a much thicker skin and realise lots of people are not going to like you. And you just kind of deal with that. You just don't worry too much about it.
Did you find...
No,
sorry,
go
I'm
on, carry on.
jumping in.
All right.
Did you find that the system was more geared towards younger mums than geriatric mums?
I tell you, it made me more aware of things that I found quite infantilizing. Like, for example, I remember going to the maternity unit in Aberdeen, and on the wall there was this almost like this frieze in kind of pastel-y kind of baby colours. And it was 8 weeks, your baby is the size of a banana, 10 weeks, it's the size of an aubergine. I think, is this how they're teaching it in medical school now? We're not 5. This is a hospital for grown-up women, not a hospital for little children. So why are you infantilizing grown women who are there for medical care? it just didn't feel like a grown-up space for grown-up people. And maybe just being a bit older and a bit kind of around the block a few times, I was more conscious of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're probably right. And I think 20-year-old me would have been a bit like, ooh, but
Yeah.
like
If I
now I
wanted to
would.
decorate a nursery, I would be in, a B&Q. I wouldn't be in the hospital.
Mm.
It just seemed, I didn't like it anyway. I thought it was a bit, it kind of sets a tone that then, it's easier for staff to treat you like you're
Yeah.
a child rather than an
Yeah.
adult woman.
Yeah.
Now, I remember when I was out with my mum, and she had fostered kids, my mum, and she'd adopted 2 boys. And we were out with the youngest, who was maybe 2 or 3 at the time. And the lady in the supermarket called me his mum
Oh,
and called her his granny. And I was mortified. Have
Mm.
you kind of faced any sort of unconscious
to be
prejudice?
honest, only once has somebody said, "Oh, is this your grandson?" And otherwise, no. I think that's probably the interaction. It's very obvious when somebody's with their granny and when they're with their mum. So yes, I am older, but I'm not so markedly older. I don't think. I don't feel it anyway.
Yeah.
No,
Maybe
you don't
people
look
are
it
just too
either.
polite to say anything.
You definitely don't look it. So, to be fair,
Well, I think the wee one just keeps me on my toes.
It's
keep you fit.
it's a lot to do with how you are in yourself as well. Like you
Absolutely.
say, if you've got a lot of energy and go about you, you're able to do all the kind of running after a 5-year-old and all the things that you do, then people, age is really just a number, isn't it?
I
You're
suppose I just think it's
projecting.
a number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I
it
try
is,
not to
isn't
think
it?
about it too much.
Yeah,
But,
exactly.
Best way. I mean, we all
so,
feel like that, regardless of having a child in later life, don't we? We all feel age is just a number, and I'm just going to crack on with it.
Definitely.
because I don't really feel any different than I did at 20 something,
No, you don't,
You're the
do
same
you?
person.
Yeah.
So back to where you are now, did having a child influence your career choice now at all?
Yeah. I don't think there's any way around that. I mean, my son was born just a few months before the COVID lockdown.
Wow.
So I was still on maternity leave during lockdown, and I ended up looking after my dad as well. So I was kind of a carer as well as a mum at that point. Yeah, I didn't think it would be possible really to work full time at that point, and I still don't, if I'm honest. And that's partly also about geography too, because I live in the sticks in Aberdeenshire. I would have to add commuting time onto
Yeah.
any working time to do that. I'm quite happy to be. I'm working part time at the moment. Sometimes it's a bit more than that, but it suits me quite well. I think it would be very difficult for me to do elected office again in the same way. I think if you're going to do that, I think a lot of families struggle. You either need to accept that you're not going to be the primary carer,
Yes.
or you have to kind of relocate your family to where the Parliament is, whether that's London or Edinburgh. Kind of have to, if you want to see them during the week,
Yeah.
that's the way you kind of have to do it. So it's not hugely practical. It's not what I want to be doing at the moment. Having waited a very long time to have him,
Yes.
I kind of
Yeah.
want to be around.
You want to spend
Yeah.
the time with him, obviously. Yeah.
Do you work from home then?
Mostly. Yeah, mostly I work from home.
Because there's a lot of companies and governments pushing back against home working now.
Yeah,
but
and I
it
get
makes
that.
such a difference.
I do get that, and I understand. Like for commerce, if you're in an office, you're also boosting the local economy in that area. You go out, you buy coffee, you buy lunch, you nip out to the shops, all that, and that all kind of helps keep a town centre vibrant. And I also get that in a business sense, it's different having a conversation on Teams or Zoom than it is having a face-to-face. And a lot of that water cooler type conversation doesn't happen in the same way. But on the other hand, the kind of thing I'm doing, I need peace and quiet to actually think. And I I'm not sure that contemporary open plan office spaces work terribly well for me personally. I much prefer to be somewhere very quiet where I can concentrate and and also read, but also focus. So I think it's horses for courses. There's pros and cons. I also think that I wouldn't necessarily be in the workplace in the same way if I was having to do the job I'm doing from a city-based location. What would happen? I would probably do a less well-paid job much closer to home, which I think is what a lot of women end up doing.
Yeah, I think so. I think you just have to adapt, don't you?
You do.
Yeah, everybody has to find a solution they can make work.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. Finding your way through a way that works for you and your family.
Yeah.
And you've achieved some pretty incredible things in your time. And I can only think that having your son is the most incredible.
I wouldn't swap it for anything. It was, we're very lucky. But he's good fun.
Well, you truly are an inspirational woman, proving that life does not have to follow a set pattern.
Yeah, definitely.
And you can beat it to your own drum. But before you go, we're going to ask you about your cocktail. Is it a cocktail or a mocktail?
Yes.
Oh, it's a cocktail.
It's
Definitely.
a cocktail, right. So tell us, if you were a cocktail, what would you be called and what would be your main ingredients and why?
It'd be a sloe gin Negroni because I love a good Negroni. I also love sloe gin, so I would just spice it up a wee bit.
What's
put them together.
What's in a sloe gin Negroni then?
Campari and sloe gin and vermouth. A sweet vermouth.
Lovely.
I've never had one of those.
No,
Might have to have one.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to try that.
Try one of those, yes.
Immediately.
Immediately, now.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Eilidh. All the best.
Thank you, ladies.
You.
Pleasure.
Thank you to our guest this week, and thanks for listening.
And we look forward to roaring with you again.